Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome to my channel. I hope that you are well. So I thought I would do something a little bit different with my wrap-ups. I normally film my wrap-ups at the end of the month. Well, I film them throughout the month and then it all goes up as one sort of vlog at the end of the month. But November's wrap-up was 48 minutes long, which I think is too long, isn't it really? I don't mind watching longer videos from booktubers that I enjoy watching, but it can be difficult, I think, to find the time to do that. So what I'm going to try is doing a weekly reads sort of thing. So the idea is once I've read a few books that I want to talk about, I'll just film a little video wrapping them up. So the idea will be that you'll probably have more frequent videos from me, but they'll be shorter. It won't necessarily be every week, like bang on the same day. It might be every 10 days, it might even be every 2 weeks. But, you know, just once I've got a few books to talk about and I've got time to film. So that's the plan. Hopefully that is okay. So I've got 3 books to talk about today. I've got a short story collection that I've just finished reading. I've got a DNF and then I've got a book which I absolutely loved. So I'll save that one for last. So first up is the short story collection. This is Marple. So this is an anthology of short stories which was published a few months ago. So it contains 12 stories written by a variety of contemporary authors, all featuring Miss Marple, of course. So I quite like this. I liked some stories more than others, of course. I think my favourite was probably the first story in the collection, which was by Lucy Foley, called Evil in Small Places, and I liked that one because I thought it was quite clever, and also it's set in a small village similar to St Mary Mead where Miss Marple lives. Some of these stories are set elsewhere. There's one set in Manhattan, for example, but I quite like classic Miss Marple settings in a little village, and I thought Lucy Foley's story was very, very good. I do need to read more by Lucy Foley because I've only read one of her books before, which I think is The Hunting Party, and for some reason in my mind I thought I didn't like it very much, so I've never picked up anything else by Lucy Foley. But when I looked on Storygraph, I gave that 4 stars, so that means I really liked it, so I do need to pick up more of her books. But no, this was an interesting read. If you're a big Miss Marple fan, then check it out. Next is my DNF. This is Burnt Paper Sky by Gilly Macmillan. So this is a thriller police procedural. Main character is called Rachel, and one day she is out for a walk with her son Ben, who is 8 years old. They're walking through some like wooded area, and Ben runs on ahead to get to the playground, and by the time Rachel catches up and reaches the playground, Ben has disappeared. So it's a missing child story. I DNF this at the halfway mark, pretty much. It's about 400 pages long. And the reason I DNF'd it was really just because I found it quite boring. It was quite slow paced. Nothing was happening really to move the plot along. But what I then did was I skipped to the end to see the solution. I'm not going to say what that is. However, I will say I am very, very pleased that I did DNF it and didn't waste any more of my time reading it, because this book does contain one of my most hated tropes, probably my most hated trope in books. If you are a long-time viewer of Jennifer Loves Books, you may have heard me mention this thing before, so you might be able to guess what it is. But yeah, I'm very pleased that I DNF'd this one. And the final book to talk about this week is one that I absolutely loved, and this is The Story of a Brief Marriage by Anuk Arudpragasam. So Anuk Arudpragasam is the author of A Passage North, which was on last year's Booker shortlist, which I absolutely loved. It was one of my favourite books of last year. And then I immediately went out and bought myself a second-hand copy of The Story of a Brief Marriage, which is his debut novel. And I was intending to read it pretty much straight away. However, here we are a year later and I've only just read it. And I loved it. It's so good. I will say I liked A Passage North a tiny bit more. Like I gave A Passage North 5 stars, and I gave this 4.5 stars, but I still absolutely loved it. So The Story of a Brief Marriage is set in Sri Lanka towards the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War. Our main character is called Dinesh. He's a young man and he is really just trying to survive as the army is encroaching on the area where he is. At the start of the book, he meets this elder man who asks if Dinesh will marry his daughter, because this man doesn't want his daughter to be alone. He thinks he's not going to make it much longer, and he wants his daughter to have someone. So he marries Dinesh and this daughter called Ganga. And it's not like it's not like a wedding. It's literally just the father saying, I'm now saying you are married. So Dinesh doesn't know this woman. He's never met her before. And then the story is really just, it takes place over about a day or so. And the story is Dinesh and Ganga surviving, really, and getting to know each other as well. It's a very brutal story. So right at the start on page 1 or 2, we have a 6-year-old boy who has to have his arm amputated, and he has to have that done while he's fully conscious. The descriptions are, it's a war zone. There's dead bodies everywhere. It's really, devastating, but it's so well written. If you've read A Passage North, you'll know the writing style of this author. And I know for people who didn't like A Passage North, the main complaint that I heard was that it was slow and not much happened. So if you thought that about A Passage North, you will think the same about the story of A Brief Marriage. There are very, very long descriptive passages. It never feels sort of like overly flowery or anything like that, because I don't really like that kind of thing, but it is very, very descriptive. A scene that another author might take 1 or 2 paragraphs to describe, this author might take 4 or 5 pages to describe. The writing has, I think, a really nice flow to it. There's one scene in particular that stands out, which is where Dinesh goes to the toilet on a beach, and the beach that is like filled with dead bodies, and that scene again takes 4 or 5 pages, but it's just so well described. You feel like you're right there. There is a sense of foreboding with the novel because of the title, The Story of a Brief Marriage. We know that this marriage is going to be brief, but we don't know why is it going to come to an end, how's that going to happen. I absolutely love this book. I thought it was incredible. I feel like Anuk Arudpragasam could be a new favourite author for me, so I'm very keen to see what he brings out next, because I'll definitely be reading it. So I am continuing with the Read What You Own challenge, which is where I've pledged to read 25 books that I own before I buy any more books or before I reserve any more library books. And so far I have read 5 of the 25. So that's not too bad. I don't have a time frame on it or a deadline. It'll just take as long as it takes. But yeah, so that's why I finally did get round to this book, which I've been meaning to read for a year. So it's definitely worth doing the challenge. In other news, my book advent calendar is going very, very well. I have had some brilliant books so far, which are just behind me here. But I've turned them round so you can't see what they are, because you will have to watch my unboxing video, which will go up after Christmas. But yes, I'm very much enjoying that. So I think that's everything for now. Let me know what you're reading, and let me know if you've read any of those books that I mentioned. Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.